Ganbare Goemon 4 on the Super Famicom, or, had it been released here in North America, probably known as Mystical Ninja in Space! This was the -3rd one we didn't get on the Super Nintendo, and it was actually the first Mystical Ninja game I ever owned. And playing it again, I've got a lot more mixed feelings than I remember having playing this the first time. Now the story follows Goemon and pals hanging out at the wise old man's house, watching Sasuke train to be the perfect housewife. Sure. Until Impact shows up with amazing but also horrifying news. See, he found this planet of people that look exactly like him, and now he's treated like a god there. Except that some evil jerkbag has taken over along with his 4 captains, and now Goemon and pals have to stop him. Well, it's probably one of the more grounded Goemon stories for what that's worth, but it also sets up an interesting gameplay mechanic in terms of basic world structure. Essentially, the Impact planet is protected by a barrier created by 4 generators located on 4 moons. And wait a minute, there just happens to be 4 members of Group Goemon, so they all split up and take a planet each. Which means that every character has their own sort of unique areas to explore, at least initially. Once you've completed each of the 4 moons, then you can swap between characters on any planet and go back and get collectibles that were previously unavailable with your own individual skill sets. But that said, in this game, all the characters play more or less pretty similar, and the biggest defining factor of which character you play as is really your character's individual abilities. For example, Goemon has the ability to use his chain pipe to grapple hook around things, although the physics of actually grappling is a little bit awkward in this game. There doesn't really seem to be any actual functional momentum. You just sort of drop from wherever you end your grapple. Awesome green-haired ninja babe Yay once again comes equipped with the noble transformation of a mermaid. Ibisumaru has the awesome power of skipping, and also the ability to twirl ribbons in extreme combat prowess. And Sasuke, being the awesome, badass, ninja clockwork party robot that he is, still comes equipped with the dedicated raise the roof button. And it's just as awesome as it's ever been, damn it. Now, the actual world structure is more closely related to Ganbare Goemon 2 than it is 3, but there are bits of 3 in here as well. You can kind of feel like it was attempting to sort of blend the two together. Essentially, you walk around a world map that's sort of similar to the first game, or even Super Mario World, select a level, and then you do some 2D platforming. But in between these levels, you'll run into towns where you have to complete various sort of puzzly objectives, and that's where things get a little bit tricky if you're importing this. It's a little bit easier to play if you don't understand Japanese compared to the 3rd game, but it's a lot harder than the 2nd game, which had all of 1 instance of reading helps, but not even necessary. Because you'll run into these little puzzles you need to complete in order to progress. For example, one puzzle Ye has to go through is go into a town and buy various ingredients for some kind of recipe for reasons I can't translate. But you're given a certain budget to buy these things. Now, every shop contains all the items you need to purchase, but you basically have to go to every single shop and buy one specific thing. And unless you're following a guide, you're basically going to be randomly running around, possibly noticing that certain number values are lower than others and you should try and grab the smallest one available. But other than that, it's really just guesswork. Another great example is Goemon has this one moment where he can't leave this one specific area until he goes through this giant dialogue tree with an NPC. And it's just a large series of yes and no questions, but it's about like 6-7 questions long, and if you screw up at any one point, they don't really tell you where you went wrong, and you just have to start over. So unless you're following a guide or you can read Japanese, it's not ideal. That said, it's a lot easier to just bumble around than, say, Ganbare Goemon 3, which was an adventure that kind of required you to understand where you really need to go from any one moment in the story. So it sort of blends the two, and as an importer who can't read a lick of Japanese, that's not necessarily ideal. But it's nowhere near as bad as the 3rd game. What, however, is worse than the 3rd game and the 2nd game, and actually I've never played the 1st game, but the platforming. And genuinely, this is where I kind of came to the realization I'm not as happy about this game as I thought I'd be. Because while I recorded this in 2 sessions, and my first session I thought was perfectly fine, the second session I got into a bunch of areas where the platforming was just bad. Like, oftentimes you'll run into situations where the platform is placed at the maximum jump distance from the previous platform, or maximum jump height. Oftentimes you'll be making blind jumps hoping that you land somewhere and don't get murdered instantly, because this game is littered with instant death pits. And on top of that, sometimes the collision detection with the platforms themselves is entirely unreliable. And that's terrifying, especially when you consider all the other aspects of platforming I just talked about. Basically, the platforming in this game just does not like you. One thing that I often go into these games kind of excited to see, and also a little bit worried because they tend to be a little bit difficult, are both the impact battles and the mini games, because impact battles have been a staple since the second Goemon game on the Super Famicom, and minigames have been a staple since the original Goemon. Well, the original console Goemon anyway, the arcadey one was just what it was. There have always been minigames, and in this game, they have both, but also neither. And the reason I say this is they kind of got rid of both by combining them. Essentially, in order to clear a moon, you have to go through an impact battle, which just happens to be a mini game, and the mini games in this game are not very good. I mean, one of the great things about mini games is if you don't like them or you're just bad at them, they're mini games. You can do them whenever you want. You're not really required to do them at any one point. Now, the impact battles in previous games were always difficult, but certainly doable with a little practice, and they were kind of interesting ways to break up the monotony. Whereas this one just kind of shoves both in your face and says, do this or you can't advance. And as someone who's atrocious at puzzle games, having one boss battle be Puyo Puyo is an absolute nightmare, and it's not like they made it easier like they did in Sonic Mania. No, this is just as bad as it is in Puyo Puyo, except you don't get one warm-up round to at least figure things out. You get curb stomped out of the gate. You've got other ones which are just button mashing, you've got ones that are timing challenged, but they're not really good, and you're forced to do them, which I think brings down the entire game as a whole. And the fact that you don't have those fun sort of rock'em sock'em robot style impact battles takes away a lot more of the unique charm this series has provided in terms of gameplay, especially when the platforming is kind of crap. I know I'm trying to get off of that, but seriously, that platforming is definitely not great. There is one really great minigame in this game, and unfortunately, because all of my save data disappeared for some reason, I can't even show it to you. And that's really killing me, but if you get 100% in this game, you get a new version of Time Pilot, which is actually kind of cool. In fact, I was at one point planning on just reviewing that separately, but yeah, all my save data is gone, so I can't, which is just fantastic. And I have one more key complaint about the overall level structure, and that is simply the final fortresses of each area. I get that they're sort of supposed to be final challenges of the area, putting you through your paces and questioning what you know and putting your skills to the test, I get that, but they're about as big as all the other levels on the world combined, and with about half as many checkpoints as there probably should be. And yes, that does mean that there's going to be about as many instant death pits and awkward jumps as all the other levels in the world combined as well. Seriously, last time I'm going to bring that up. But the fortresses just feel like they could have been segmented or broken up so that each area had a few more worlds or something, but overall, they just feel a little bit tedious to try and go through. But if you can get past some awkward platforming and you've got the patience because you're going to be seeing the game over screen a lot, there's still some decent platforming here, and of course it's a Goemon game, so there's going to at least be some enjoyable characters and some really fun times if you're willing to look for it. Now, the overall presentation to Ganbare Goemon 4 is excellent. I think this is probably visually the best looking of the Goemon games. Each of the characters has a bunch of different unique animations for talking, different emotions. All the villagers basically look like they kind of took the traits of villagers from all the previous games, but you know, got that sort of crazy we're aliens sort of thing going on with them. There's a lot of really neat little mashups here, like you've got the little kid who's a starfish, you've got the thief who is now like this weird massive tentacles, you've got that girl who pays you money because she has a crush on you who is now a squid lady who heals your health. And every character's planets have their own unique theme, which in turn means that, you know, every character has sort of a different experience. Sasuke has an ice planet, Yae has a water planet just to justify that she still has her mermaid abilities, Ibisumaru has a forest planet, and Goemon has a desert sports planet for reasons. That one was a bit weird. But overall, the visual presentation is quite nice. And the audio presentation is actually pretty flooring. First and foremost, this game has voice acting on the Super Nintendo. In fact, I think that Konami quite liked the voices enough that they actually reused them for Mystical Ninja starring Goemon. Although, I think they got someone else to re-record Ye's voice for that game. She seemed to have a deeper voice than she did in this game, but it reuses a lot of voice clips. In fact, it has more voice clips in this game than Mystical Ninja starring Goemon had. Unless we're talking about the Japanese version, which actually had a fully voiced intro. That's the one caveat to that. But voice acting in Super Nintendo, and really well done. It does that thing that I absolutely love about really well done soundtracks, which is it takes a core melody for each area, but remixes it for every single stage. Sort of like Super Mario World, where every song had the same melody, but every single stage reworked it a little bit, just depending on where you were in the world. It creates a singular continuity that makes you feel like you're on the same adventure, but every area is a little bit different. And I love that sort of audible continuity, and every single planet has its own sort of unique melody that's reworked into levels. It's tremendous, leading to a fantastic presentation. Now, if you want a copy of Ganbare Goemon 4, you can actually get it really, really cheap. In fact, it's cheaper than when I bought it. You can get it for about $10, which is about $5 less than I paid for it, and honestly, it's pretty good for that price. Don't get me wrong, there's lots of platforming issues, but if you're willing to put up with that, you've still got a pretty fun game. Now that said, this is also the last Ganbare Goemon game on the Super Famicom I haven't talked about. Unless we're counting that weird Abisumaru only puzzle thing, which, who does that? So I think it's important to kind of talk about where this stands in the series. At least the Super Famicom ones. Is this the best one on the Super Famicom? Absolutely not. I think the second one is probably the best. Granted, I've not played the original that came out in North America or anything, but Ganbare Goemon 2 had a great mix of mini-games, impact battles, levels, each level being unique and having its own theme song and its own personality, its own gimmicks and everything. That game just did everything right, and the platforming was spot on. And while Ganbare Goemon 3 had some pretty damn good platforming and interesting levels as well, I think the fact that it's so much more reliant on understanding written Japanese that if you can't do it, it's going to be a lot harder to get into, whereas this one's a bit simpler, even though it has that similar issue. So I think if I had to put them in order of recommendation for importers, I would go number 2, number 4, then number 3. Because while they're all excellent, it's really more about ease of getting into the games. Because, again, they are all excellent games, but some are just easier to get into, some are a better, more memorable, more polished experience, and some aren't. And I think of the 3, this one sits in the middle. But if you are looking to import for your Super Famicom, well, first of all, you can see videos on all 3 on my channel, and you probably should if you want a broader look at what each individual game really is. I think they're all recommended in their own rights, and they are all fairly affordable, which makes them great games to pick up, especially given how overtly Japanese they are. I mean, that's why we in North America only got 4 of them. But as it stands, Ganbare Goemon 4 is just sort of the middle child. It's not bad, but I don't think it's going to reach the upper echelons of awesome that was Ganbare Goemon 2. Still, it is a wacky, crazy Japanese time, and I mean, come on. It has everyone's favorite clockwork disco ninja party robot, with a dedicated raise the roof button. Sasuke approves. Who might argue?